Welcome to chaomix. Death is something no one can outrun, not even Sonic himself. Oh, sorry, that got kind of existential. It's okay though, we always have Sonic colors to go back to pretend all that stuff doesn't exist. Just rainbows and sunshine and donuts and candy and that one alien baby from Chicken Little. Yeah, I'm joking, but I'm also kind of not. One thing those 2010 era games did that everything else didn't was shy away from those darker concepts such as death. Because believe it or not, death is something that happens pretty frequently in the Sonic series outside of that era. And I'm not talking about how, for instance, when you stomp on a Goomba and they turn into a cloud of dust in a Mario game. I'm talking about like death. And for really important characters, no less. There's a surprising amount of them if you can believe it, but not as many as the number of people who watch my videos but aren't subscribed to the channel. So if that sounds like you, I would really appreciate it if you took a second out of your time and went down and hit that subscribe button. And the like button too while you're at it. It really helps me out and it's free, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Thank you. Anyways, let's head over to the Sonic morgue and catalog every instance of death towards major characters in the Sonic series. Dying sucks, and one thing you have to do to make sure you don't die is eat. But eating can be difficult because of all the prep work you have to do. That's where today's sponsor, Factor, is here to help. Listen, I love cooking, but it's a lot of work, and some days I just don't feel like spending all the time and effort. Especially on days like today where I'm cramming in work for one of these videos and it feels like I just don't have the time. Well, Factor comes in clutch to help ease the stress of that exact sort of busy lifestyle. Because meals arrive at your doorstep pre-prepared and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Making each meal couldn't be any easier, and I haven't even touched on how great they taste. My absolute favorite had to be the roasted tomato and chili ground beef. It was absolutely amazing. I know for a fact that eating with Factor has saved me so much time and energy that I can put into doing the important things in my life, like making videos about Sonic the Hedgehog. Very important stuff. Head over to factor75.com or click the link in the description and use code chaomix50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Treat yourself to a delicious, convenient meal delivered right to your doorstep. Again, that's 50% off your first Factor box, so don't miss out and head over today. Thank you so much to Factor for making videos like this possible, and with all that being said, let's continue with today's episode. Let's talk about each of the major deaths within the Sonic series. I'll be including everything from the games except for your regular badniks and the obvious monsters of the week that Sonic defeats at the end of his games, like the Bio-Lizard or Dark Gaia for example. Because 1, those guys were literally created for the sole purpose of being defeated by Sonic, and 2, I don't really consider them characters, you know? I mainly just want to talk about major characters that play at least a bit of a sentient role within the story. Also, I think it goes without saying, but spoiler warning for the entire Sonic series, I guess. Anyways, did you know that almost every main character has died at some point? Quotation marks on died. Obviously, they didn't stay dead or else there'd be no Sonic characters left. But at some point, almost all of these characters have bit the dust in one way or another. In the 2006 hit game, Sonic the Hedgehog, the Blue Rat himself dies at the hands of Mephiles the Dark during the 4th campaign titled The Last Story. I know, right? How dare the main character of the series have the audacity to die? You literally have plot armor. In order to revive the flames of disaster sealed within Princess Elise, Mephiles would need to make Elise cry. Why exactly does he have to go and do that, you might be asking? Well, I promise you, it isn't just because he's a grade A asshole. His motive behind this was because the world-ending monstrosity known as Iblis happened to be sealed within Elise when she was a little girl. And the only thing preventing it from escaping was reliant on her not crying a single tear for the rest of her life. That's like trying to hold together an entire treehouse with duct tape. It just ain't happening. Sure, it's a bit hard to believe that she got that far in life without crying once, but Sonic's death would 100% be the straw that breaks the camel's back here. And this is because the two formed a very strong bond throughout the game. Sonic's death is actually one of the more gruesome on this list. After being blinded by the flashing light of a Chaos Emerald, Mephiles sneaks up from behind and impales the Hedgehog through the heart with an enormous energy spear. Clearly, this isn't the end for Sonic, or else we wouldn't be getting any more games. Or at least games with Sonic in the title, and we all know how that usually goes. So after all of Sonic's friends gather the 7 Chaos Emeralds, Elise is able to revive Sonic by giving him a big ol' smooch right on the lips. This scene would haunt every single big game journalist to ever review a Sonic game for the foreseeable future. But for better, or for worse, it made it so that we'd keep getting Sonic games since we no longer have a dead protagonist. Awesome. Tails also has his time to shine, and by shine I mean straight up die. In the 8-bit version of Sonic 2, there are 2 different endings. and depending on which one you get is the factor that decides Tails' fate. Obviously, getting the good ending has you see Sonic rescuing Tails and the two running off into the sunset together. But getting the bad ending shows something a little bit darker. Sonic defeats Mecha Sonic and escapes without Tails, running into the sunset by himself. The sky transitions to nighttime. Sonic looks up, and in the constellation, we can see a faded image of Tails' face, implying that our two-tailed buddy is no more. Clearly, the canon ending is the one where Sonic saves Tails, or else we'd never be seeing Tails ever again in any other games. So Tails' death in this game could be considered a part of a separate timeline branching off of the main Sonic canon. And that's if this game is even considered canon in the first place. Sonic Lost World, despite being in an era I said shied away from the concept of death, still did in fact have a few off-screen implied deaths of some of the main cast of characters. Well, depending on how you want to look at it. Zavok, seeking revenge, uses a tool stolen from Dr. Eggman called the Extractor, and targets it at Earth to slowly drain it of its energy. We can see Earth's foliage wither away and die as all of the energy is funneled out. But it wasn't just the plant life, because we can see Amy slowly losing energy as she's FaceTiming Sonic right before the power completely cuts out. This implies that the life energy wasn't only drained from the plants, but living organisms like Amy as well. And since Knuckles was also there, we know that he would have been drained of all of his life energy as well. Heck, let's go even further. Everything on Earth, period, probably had the life energy sucked out of it at that point. Well, temporarily, of course. Because fret not, by the end of the game, all life on Earth is revitalized, so nobody ends up actually staying dead in the end. If you even consider this dying in the first place, that is. Shadow the Hedgehog is a character that's on this list due to a sort of technicality. We all know that Shadow spends the remainder of his energy using Chaos Control in order to save the Earth from colliding with the Bio Lizard at the end of Sonic Adventure 2. Because of this, Shadow plummets down to the Earth and is presumed dead by the rest of the cast. The next game, Sonic Heroes, reveals that Shadow did in fact survive the fall. Or did he? Throughout not only this game, but also the preceding game, 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog, Shadow goes on a journey to discover the truth to his past and his mysterious reappearance after the events of SA2. Is he the original Shadow the Hedgehog, or simply a replica android built to have the original's memories? In 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog, there's a point where Dr. Eggman tells Shadow that he's an android, but later on admits to him that this was a lie and he was the real deal the entire time. But even though Shadow did survive his plummet towards Earth, I think it's important not to forget some of the context surrounding Sonic Adventure 2's development in the real world. As far as Sonic Team themselves knew at the time, Sonic Adventure 2 was supposed to be their final game. With the Dreamcast officially pronounced dead, Sega would exit the console industry after being a top competitor for years, and their future was incredibly uncertain. Sure, they would eventually become a third-party developer and continue making games on other consoles, but it's vital to remember that there was a point where their future was entirely up in the air, and at that time, Sonic Adventure 2 was meant to be the final Sonic story. And Shadow's death at the time of SA2's release was meant to be conclusive. This means that when they wrote the ending of SA2, Shadow was really meant to die here. Too bad they didn't know that Shadow would go on to be the most popular Sonic character, surpassing even Sonic himself, and they'd basically be forced to bring him back whether they wanted to or not. Anyways, one of the more underappreciated aspects of the Sonic series definitely has to be its robot designs. Not only are they cool looking, but there's quite a few of them. Although these guys were basically built to be destroyed by Sonic, they do have a bit more personality to them than your average Badnik or Lovecraftian monster of the week, so that's why we'll be talking about some of them here. Rapid fire time, let's go! First up, we have Mecha Sonic from the 16-bit version of Sonic 2. Some might say this was the prototype version of Metal Sonic, seeing as this robot is also meant to resemble the Hedgehog. This is the second to final boss in Sonic 2 and is thrashed by Sonic all without even carrying a single ring. Yeah, thanks for that, game. Real fun time there. Next, we have Mecha Sonic. Again, but this time it's the one from the 8-bit version of Sonic 2. Although he has the same name, this is actually a completely different mech. However, while he does have the same design, that doesn't stop him from sharing the same fate as his 16-bit counterpart. He also appears in Sonic Mania to die again in bulk. Then we have Mecha Sonic Mark II. Yeah, thankfully there's something to differentiate this guy from the other ones this time. Sonic proves triumphant over Mecha Sonic Mark II in Sky Sanctuary, but it isn't until the mecha has a second bout with Knuckles where he gets dismantled for good. Well, not before using the Master Emerald to achieve a super state as a last-ditch effort. But even with this extra juice, the robot still didn't stand a chance against the Guardian of the Master Emerald. Metal Sonic, we all know Metal Sonic. He's got speed to match the Blue Hedgehog himself, but gets dismantled quite a bit throughout the course of the entire series. He's often rebuilt, but like all the other robots here, each defeat may or may not constitute as a death. We're gonna say it's a death though, just for the sake of this video. For instance, in Sonic CD, he slams face first at full speed straight into a wall trying to race Sonic. He melts into a bed of lava at the end of the Sonic OVA. He explodes after being defeated in Sonic Triple Trouble. In Knuckles Chaotix, he's dismantled by the Chaotix crew after turning into this terrifying abomination called Metal Sonic Kai. In Sonic Mania, he turns into a similar form called Giga Metal Sonic, but still gets his ass scrapped. In Sonic Generations, he gets his head kicked in by Classic Sonic and explodes. And Sonic 4 Episode 2 has a similar end to Sonic CD as he crashes into a wall as he tries to win against Sonic in a race. Honestly, I think Metal Sonic might have gone through it the most out of any character on this entire list. Mecha Knuckles is gonna be the last Robo that we talk about, for now. His first and only appearance is in Sonic Advance, and he fights and is defeated by every playable character in the game. It's not clear who dismantles him for good, but I know for a fact that he definitely didn't survive getting his ass kicked by 4 different characters in a row. Okay, so I said I was only gonna do the games, but I'm gonna make an exception for Sonic X, since it was developed alongside Sonic Team and has some really interesting deaths. Because the next 2 character deaths that we have are both from Season 3 of Sonic X, the Metarex arc. Keep in mind, you'll need to watch the Japanese dub specifically because the English dub censors out a lot of this. First, we have Molly, whose death was entirely covered up in the English dub. In a valiant effort to protect her friends during an airship battle with the Metarex, Molly charges in guns blazing. While in the English dub it's implied she escapes alive per Shadow's instructions, the Japanese dub shows her charging in headfirst after locking tear-filled eyes with Shadow and her spaceship exploding moments later. Honestly, one of the saddest deaths in the entire series. And it probably would be the saddest death if it weren't for our next character, Cosmo. Cosmo would become the love interest of Tails after joining with Sonic and his friends to defeat the Metarex race. While the two had something really nice going on between them, it wouldn't last because Cosmo would eventually sacrifice herself in the end. Her plan was to engulf the Metarex's planet by turning into a giant cherry blossom and exploding to take out the entire planet with herself. The only issue, Tails would have to be the one to shoot her to complete this plan. After wrestling with some extreme emotions, Tails would finally pull the trigger so that Cosmo's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. With that, the wrath of the Metarex race would be no more, and Tails would plant Cosmo's heart in a pot to always remember her. Sonic Adventure 1 has a lot of deaths, many unnamed though. So let's start off with those, shall we? First, we have pretty much any Station Square civilian that died during the fight with Perfect Chaos. I mean, the dude violently flooded an entire city within just about a minute. There's no way nobody died from this, right? I'm pretty sure like a lot of people died from this. Next, we have the entirety of the Echidna tribe. When fighting for the power of the Chaos Emeralds, the Echidna tribe would awaken the wrath of Chaos. Chaos would wipe out their entire clan and split Angel Island apart from the rest of the Earth by suspending it into the sky. But let's get a bit more specific here, because there are 2 Echidnas that play a larger role in this plot. The first is Chief Pachacamac. Chief Pachacamac used to be a pacifist like his mother and daughter, but would eventually seek to grow his land for his people. Ugh, that's how it always starts, isn't it? Doing so would cause him to become power hungry, and he'd eventually turn into a warlord after battling opposing clans for power. This would ultimately trigger the Wrath of Chaos and have his entire clan wiped out overnight. This may or may not include his daughter Tikal, who tried to stop him and even stood in front of him and his soldiers on their conquest to take the Master Emerald's power for themselves. It's unknown if Tikal dies here or at some other point, maybe even due to old age. But because these events happened so long ago, we know for a fact that Tikal is deceased as we communicate with her spirit through the course of Sonic Adventure 1. Oh yeah, we have a few more robos to add here. There's obviously E102 Gamma, who dies by self-destructing in order to set himself free. Yeah, it's very existential. Maybe another topic for another video. And this is after he does the same to all of his brothers. E103 Delta, E104 Epsilon, E105 Zeta, and E101 Beta. There's also Zero, who dies by the hands of Amy Rose of all people. After stalking her through various levels, the robot finally gets what it's got coming by being bashed in the noggin by Amy's hammer and explodes into pieces. It's also debatable if Chaos dies at the end of Sonic Adventure. Listen, he goes off with Tikal's ghost, which kind of implies that he's ascending to some kind of heaven with her. But on the other hand, he also appears in some other games. However, I'm pretty sure these appearances are usually never actually him. For example, in Sonic Battle, Chaos appears in front of the Master Emerald to fight the Robot Emerald during his story campaign. He kind of just appears and disappears without much explanation or fanfare, almost as if it could be his ghost or some kind of projection of him. Chaos also reappears in Sonic Adventure 2's multiplayer, which isn't exactly canon. In Generations, he reappears as Perfect Chaos, but only because of time travel. In Sonic Forces, he's only an illusion of the Phantom Ruby. So I'm gonna put Chaos here after all, because I do truly think he ascends to the afterlife with Tikal at the end of Sonic Adventure 1. Like its predecessor, Sonic Adventure 2 also has quite a few deaths to add to our list. During the raid of the Space Colony Ark by Gun, the soldiers would go on to kill every single passenger on board. Well, almost every passenger. Two specific passengers we'll be looking at include the two members of the Robotnik family, Eggman's grandfather and cousin. Eggman's cousin, Mario Robotnik, a crucial character that plays into much of the development of Shadow the Hedgehog's character arc, is shot right in front of the Hedgehog by a gun soldier. The two managed to retreat into an escape pod room, and Maria would use the last of her strength to eject Shadow off of the Ark and towards Earth. Eggman's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, would be spared and forced to do gun spitting back on Earth until they'd eventually execute him by firing squad. Yes, that's a real thing. And finally, there's this very overlooked portion of Sonic Adventure 2's story where Team Dark explodes an entire island, and I'm pretty convinced we have a few deaths here. I ranted about it in a previous video, so let me just play that part here real quick.
Thousands of people literally died from this. Like, there's no way that there were no casualties. I guess all the enemies you fight on this island are robots, but we see in Rouge's boss fight against the gun mech Flying Dog that a human is in the cockpit. If there's someone piloting this robot, we have to assume that there are other humans on this island. There's no way it's just this one guy. But even if there aren't, this guy piloting the mech is screwed. At the very least, he's dead. Without a question. And at most, probably thousands more. So yeah, Eggman is ruthless.
This is also totally unconfirmed, but like, do you think whoever was driving the gun truck is still alive? He totally slams headfirst into a brick wall at like 80 miles an hour. And ignoring him, do you think any of these parked cars he ran over had people in it? I mean, that goes for Sonic too, because he definitely topples over a bunch of cars on his way through City Escape. Makes you think. Sonic Battle has the death of Emerald, another robot who we end up trading with each character throughout the game. Emerald is programmed to follow the orders of whoever presents themselves as the strongest. So at the end of the game, when Eggman uses a cannon to destroy a group of stars, Emerald's programming goes haywire as his instincts to follow Eggman's commands clash with his newfound personality of being friends with Sonic and crew. Sonic is forced to battle Emerald, and he unfortunately sustains damage that ends up killing him. In my opinion, this is one of the more tragic deaths in the Sonic series. 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog is truly the game of all time. It's got some of the most bizarre deaths on this list, so let's get into them. Since the game has so many endings, there's a lot of non-canon stuff that ends up happening, but they still happen, so we're gonna talk about them. First, we have a handful of endings where Shadow is shown karate chopping Eggman, and then the screen cuts to black, implying that the blow literally kills him. I mean, just listen to this. We also have a few endings where Shadow takes down Sonic and the Diablon, a mech piloted by the gun commander. And since Shadow is working for the Black Arms, it can be implied that they'd eventually either be killed by Shadow or eaten by the Black Arms at some point, since that's what they do. There's also an ending where Shadow claims he's gonna destroy the planet. So if we go by his word, we can assume that Shadow uses the Eclipse Cannon on Earth and destroys all life along with the planet. Pretty much any ending where Shadow sides with the Black Arms, we can probably also assume that the entire human race is doomed, since the Black Arms' entire plan is to paralyze and eat the human race's sustenance, as we see them attempt in the true ending of the game. Speaking of the true ending, let's talk about the canon deaths within this game now. Obviously, we have Shadow using the Eclipse Cannon at the finale of the true ending to blow up the Black Comet. This destroys not only Black Doom, but the entire Black Arms species, driving them to complete extinction. Oh yeah, and let's not forget about that intro cutscene with the Black Arms descend on Westopolis and cause absolute carnage. Just like Chaos demolishing Station Square with zero notice, there's absolutely no way nobody died during this. Like, this is arguably worse than what Chaos did. Let's go back to Sonic 06 for a second. I know, everyone's favorite game. A lot of people forget about this, but both Eggman and Elise die in this game. During the original timeline, Eggman and Elise die on board Eggman's ship before Sonic goes into the past to prevent it from happening. We can see Eggman's ship slowly descend and eventually crash and explode on the horizon before Sonic is able to save them. Like, during this conversation between Sonic and Silver, Eggman and Elise are dead. Like, they died, the explosion happened, and they are dead as these two are speaking. Obviously, Sonic goes back into the past shortly after this to save them, but for a second it's kinda like, ooh. The Duchess of Soliana, aka Princess Elisa's mom, is mentioned to have died when Elise was a child. We're not exactly sure what caused her death, but it would drive the Duke of Soliana, aka Princess Elisa's dad, to experiment with time travel in order to see his wife again by using the power of their god Solaris. In doing so, he'd accidentally cause an explosion, splitting Solaris into two and killing not only himself, but all of the other scientists within the facility. Solaris had split into two, and one of those halves happened to be Mephiles the Dark. Yeah, that same guy who stabbed Sonic through the heart that we talked about earlier. Eventually, the two halves of Solaris would rejoin, but would go berserk as it tried to consume every existing timeline. It would be defeated by Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, but the only way for them to do so was to extinguish its flame in the past before any of this happened in the first place, completely erasing Solaris from existence. This would ultimately kill Mephiles the Dark since he was a part of Solaris. Sonic Unleashed has this entire intro sequence where Eggman splits the world into pieces. Pretty sure some people must have died from that, right? Like, imagine sailing in a boat and being right on the spot where the world splits and then falling into the Earth's core. Other than that ridiculously unlucky situation, I feel like there must have been massive environmental calamities to come with this, so like, people must have died at this point, right? But if not, that's kind of it for this game. You'd maybe think that Chip would have been listed here, but all that really happens to him is that he's returned back to being sealed inside of the Earth with Dark Gaia, so he isn't actually dead. When I put it like that, it kinda makes this bracelet a little less impactful, huh? Sonic Rivals 2 has Metal Sonic 3.0, who gets trapped in Ifrit's dimension and is assumed to be destroyed at some point. An uninteresting end to an uninteresting character. Eraser Jin, an evil genie and the main villain of Sonic and the Secret Rings, goes to deal the finishing blow to Sonic after cornering him. But at the last second, Shara, who had assisted Sonic throughout the entire game at that point, took on the attack herself and falls to the ground deceased. But worry not, because after defeating Eraser Jin, Sonic is able to put him to work and use his 3 wishes, and he uses one wish to bring Shara back to life. Sonic then reseals Eraser Jin back inside of his lamp, which he then proceeds to throw into a pit of lava. Ouch, yeah, he is not coming back from that one. Captain Whisker from Sonic Rush Adventure is presumed dead as he sinks to the bottom of the ocean with his ship. I didn't play this game, so I can't really comment any further. I just know this happened because I looked it up on the Sonic Wiki. Pro YouTuber move right there, by the way. There's a handful of characters from Sonic Lost World that may or may not have died, and it kind of just depends on how you want to look at it. Obviously, we have the Deadly Six, who Sonic fights throughout the course of the game. Upon defeat, they turn into little clouds of smoke, and for most of them, we pretty much never see them again. Zaz, Xena, Master Zik, Zamam, Zor, all of these guys poof. But does that mean that they're dead? Zabot comes back to be in Team Sonic Racing, so maybe he was the only survivor. Because the rest only appear in spin-off material like the Olympic Games series, which aren't canon by any means, but maybe it still might indicate that they're still around at least. It's very unclear, so I don't actually know if I can count these guys as dead or not. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, next we have Sonic Forces, which is actually kind of a juicy one. This is a game that tried to go a bit too dark and kind of for no good reason. Maybe to compensate for how soft all of the recent games before it had been. It has a lot of themes of war, so with that, you know, there's gonna be a few deaths here and there. Can't win a war without breaking a few eggs, I think that's how the saying goes. So yeah, lots of civilian casualties are definitely confirmed in some of the radio communications we hear throughout the game. However, it's unclear what they really mean by this. Are they just like knocked out, injured, or are they like straight up dead? They never really specify, which just kinda leaves it up to the imagination. But like a lot of other deaths on this list, I think we can go ahead and assume that there were definitely some fatal casualties within some of these battles. We know for a fact that Shadow wiped out Infinite's entire squad. So going by our same logic, we now know that Shadow is a ruthless killer. But I think we already knew that based on how Shadow had zero hesitation to karate chop Eggman to death in Shadow 05. Speaking of Infinite, it's apparently a bit unclear for some people on if he's dead or not. I remember when the Sonic Encyclopedia came out, people were screenshotting this passage from the book claiming that Infinite was confirmed to be dead or something. But honestly, I never really got that myself from reading this. I don't know where people got that from. All this is basically saying is that he's trapped within the Phantom Ruby, which means there is opportunity for someone to go ahead and release him again one day, so I don't think I'd go as far as to say that he's literally dead. Anyways, our final game that we'll be going over is Sonic Frontiers. While not as arbitrarily dark as Sonic Forces, we do still have some darker moments that I feel are much more earned. and most of these moments include death. First, we have the annihilation of the entire ancient race. After fleeing to Earth to escape the End's terror, it manages to follow them to Earth and eventually wipe them out. It's unclear how the entire race becomes completely extinct, because from the cutscenes, it looks like they managed to seal the End within the Titan Supreme. But maybe the End had run them so down at that point that even after doing that, they weren't able to sustain their population and they eventually fizzled out. Or maybe a select few did escape. After all, chaos existing does tell us that the ancients do live on in some way. Even so, a large majority of their race was wiped out by the End, which is explained throughout the plot of Sonic Frontiers. We also have Sage, the AI daughter of Dr. Eggman, and also one of my new favorite characters. Although she's an AI, she exhibits great sentience and free will. Towards the end of the game, she starts having a change of heart that we can see pretty visually here as she turns from black and red to white and blue. Sage ends up sacrificing herself by absorbing the catastrophic explosion the End was attempting to cause as a last-ditch effort to destroy the Earth. However, thankfully it's revealed in the post-credits scene that Eggman ends up reconstructing Sage, so I'm sure this won't be the last we'll be seeing of her. The question is though, is this the same Sage that we interacted with throughout Sonic Frontiers, or an entirely new one? Wow, lots of shadow parallels, down to the way she sacrifices herself during the final battle, to being rescued by Dr. Eggman and not knowing if she's the original or a clone. No wonder I really like Sage. Alright, raise your hand if that was more death than you thought for a series about a blue hedgehog that runs fast. I know, I was definitely surprised after cataloging them all in one place. It's not like death is the end-all be-all for a good Sonic story. It's just nice when you know that a Sonic game isn't afraid to have both lighthearted moments and darker moments. I mean, Disney movies do it all the time. It adds to that universal appeal that makes Sonic a game franchise that anyone of any age can enjoy. And it seems that Sonic Frontiers brought this tone back, so I think we can look forward to having it in at least a few more games. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video. Again, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe for more content similar to this. In the comments below, let me know what the saddest death in the Sonic series was. And finally, thank you to my amazing channel members for supporting the channel. There's like a lot of you guys now. Huge shout out to Erwin the Fennec Fox for donating a ton of memberships on my last stream. Seriously, that might be like the nicest thing a fan has ever done for me on this channel. Anyways, with all that being said, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Peace.